All right, we're back. Hopefully you have actually completed the scale and did the survey in Canvas so that I can see the pattern of the class after this is over with. And I'll go ahead and I'll post the results for you in the module. All right, so if you haven't taken the survey, stop me and go do it. All right, I'm going to trust that everybody has taken the survey. So let's look at the theory. So this, as I said in the last video, this we've transitioned into like an evolutionary explanation of love. One of the things that's really important before I reveal the theory and what's going on is one of the most common questions I get is, what if a person is not heterosexual? What if a person is not engaging in sex with any intention of ever having offspring? Like what if you are not in the, stereotypical heterosexual mating category? So there's a couple of things to say. One is that evolutionary theory is not going to consider those perspectives. It's just the nature of the theory, right? Evolutionary theory talks about those kinds of behaviors, those kinds of outcomes that contribute to or have effects on reproductive capability. Like that's what the whole theory is about. It's called natural selection. And so only those things that can impact the probability of you becoming a parent would have any impact on the theory, right? So when we talk about this, it by definition leaves a lot of people out. That's how evolutionary theory runs. But I have to say, I've been doing a lot of research using evolutionary psychology's principles, and even as we correct for people's sexual orientation or gender identity or other kinds of things, it seems like some of the same motivations sort of oversee our behavior, even when sort of reproduction's off the table. Another question I get is, well, what about people who are using birth control or other kinds of things? The argument from the evolutionary side is that those things have happened so recently. Like the option of using birth control is such a recent outcome in the evolutionary history that it doesn't have a lot of effect on how our brain works. What evolutionary psychologists like to say is that you're walking around with a caveman brain. And yes, we have modern pressures or modern variations on things that can impact what actually will be the outcome. Our brain is not prepared to take those into consideration, according to evolutionary theory. So I just wanted to set it up that it probably applies to everyone, even if you feel like you're in a category that this shouldn't apply to. Now, it's not perfect. And so I'm going to probably, in what I share with you, you're probably going to see that the class's behavior does not follow exactly what the theory predicts. That's true. I tried to really set you up to think about a potential mate who you are committing to for life with the intention of raising children, because that's what this is about, right? So keep that in mind. So according to evolutionary theory, and according to most research that has used this scale, the good financial, let's see, what did I mark here? There we go. Okay, yeah. Good financial prospects, a caring and responsible personality, and ambition and industriousness are more commonly going to be selected by female respondents. And then the other three are going to be more commonly selected by male respondents: good looks, physical attractiveness, and an exciting personality. This may not match what you picked, so you're just going to have to go with it. You might have picked something else, and that's, that happens in the research. People have, different motives, and you're at different stages of life and considering different kinds of things and whatever. But overarchingly, the pattern is that females tend to focus in on, let's break these down, characteristics that imply that the mate that they think that they're picking for the rest of their lives and that they think they're going to be potentially rearing offspring with is going to have access to resources and dedication to her and her offspring. So when looking for a mate, good financial prospects and ambition and industriousness indicate the ability to take care of the family. And then the caring and responsible personality indicates the desire to take care of the family. So on average, females are more likely to pick these three because these are things that will help them to feel comfortable that this potential mate will be around and can support the offspring that are produced within the relationship. The males, on the other hand, well, they're picking good looks and physical attractiveness. Okay, those seem to be things that have to do with just appearance, right? And then an exciting personality. And really, what's the difference between good looks and physical attractiveness? Are you wondering about that? Are you wondering about, a caring and responsible personality? How different is that from, ambition and industrious? Like, what are the differences on these things? Okay. To explain why the two sexes might pick different things, let's talk about the differences in. I'm struggling. I want to say, I almost said contribution, maybe effort that is demanded of the two sexes in the production of offspring, right? Males have very low costs associated with the production of offspring. I'm not talking about raising them. I'm not talking about paying for them to go to college. I'm talking about making the offspring. Males have very low costs associated with making an offspring. Okay, so this isn't human sexuality, so I'm going to keep this a little bit glossing. But if you think about sperm, the average ejaculation contains 200 to 500 million sperm. 200 to 500 million sperm per ejaculation. Some people like to take that just sheer number and say, sperm is kind of cheap. Like every day I can make another 200 to 500 million sperm. It takes a month to make them, just FYI, if this is human sexuality, we go through that. It takes about a month to make a sperm, but every day a new, probably even more often than a day, a new batch that's been cooking for 28 days appears. So there's just so many. So it's okay if maybe you waste one here or there by having picked an inappropriate mate who maybe isn't fertile, or having picked a mate who doesn't have great genes, or having wasted it in masturbation or something like that. It doesn't matter because I'll just make more and I'll make another 200 million of them. So it's like very low cost. There's very little risk to a male when he's making a baby, right? The probability of death during the production of a baby is very low for a male. Even in ancestral history, even in caveman days, very few males died in the process of making a baby, right? So the risks are much lower for males in reproduction, whereas for females, the costs are much higher. They only make one egg per month. So if they pick the wrong mate, one who doesn't have resources or one who doesn't stick around and help rear the children or whatever, they've wasted an entire year almost of reproductive capability, right? Whereas a male, they've wasted, I don't know, if you're young, you could probably ejaculate again in an hour, right? So, I mean, the cost is just so much higher for females. There's, you only get one chance a month. You only really get one chance if you become pregnant, you're bound up for 9 months. It's just a bigger thing. And then there's danger associated with, pregnancy for women, for females. The chance of death is much higher for a female in the process of gestation, in the postpartum period, dying in childbirth. I mean, it's just so much riskier for females. And so a lot of people look at these differences as the motivation for differences in attitudes about what matters in picking a mate for males and females. So males who have, we'll call it more genetic success, they have healthier genes. They look better. They are symmetrical in appearance, stuff like that. Tend to have more partners. They probably have more partners to choose from. So physical attractiveness is an important factor for females when considering a male mate. It is important. It's just not, on average, the top three. But attractive males tend to have more partners. Females who have more genetic success tend to have fewer partners. Females who have offspring that live, that's a good measure of genetic success, tend to have fewer partners. The females who are able to successfully conceive, carry, and deliver, and then bring to at least like 5 years of age, which is the, sort of the cutoff for the riskiest time in childhood. Those females who are successful at that level tend to have fewer partners than females who are not successful at that level. So for males, lots of partners is a fine strategy. For females, fewer partners is a better strategy for their reproductive fitness. So again, a completely opposite set of outcomes or motivations, right? Because females have higher costs bound up in having offspring, because each of their offspring is more likely to survive if they have a single partner who is dedicated to her and to the success of this offspring, she's going to have a better outcome. You can imagine that it would be in the female's best interest in the long run to pick wisely and have a mate who will stick around and has the resources and the ambition to help contribute to the rearing of the offspring. Males, because they have this unlimited reproductive capability, philosophically, it's in their best interest, if they're going to settle down, to pick someone who has outward signs of reproductive capability. So physical attractiveness and good looks are outward signs of healthy genes that would give the impression of genetic fitness, that this person probably has good genes and probably is young and is probably going to be able to produce offspring. And so it's a guess. So good looks and attractiveness are like a proxy for knowing that the person is going to be able to produce healthy offspring. So according to the evolutionary perspective, these things that are valued in males and females differentially are things that are sort of standing in for what the person might be looking for. If an offspring were to come, would this person be a good parent for that offspring, right? I went to a PhD program that had a really strong evolutionary psychology component to it, and one of the famous researchers in that area, Steve Gangestad, he coined the term CADs versus DADs. And one of the things he talked about is how CADs are good-looking, genetically fit, outwardly seem to have all the characteristics that females desire, but they don't have to commit because females are giving them access without having to commit. Dads are the kinds of males who have the characteristics that cause them to stay and help rear the offspring and things like have access to resources and stuff like that. Sometimes females will mate or settle down with a dad type who has the characteristics that would be good for the rearing of the offspring. And then they will have side deals with CADs, securing the better genetic material, but then being reared within the more stable household. So sometimes when the sexes look at this model here and they look at what the other sex tends to pick, like females oftentimes will look at that list and say, well, males are shallow. They're just looking for looks and like that, they're shallow. Males will look at the female list and say, well, females are shallow because look, they're just looking for money and, ambition. So they'll have power. And, so each sex thinks the other one's motives are not as pure as their own sex's motives, or maybe they might even deny their own sex's motives. But both sexes are sort of looking for the thing that would help serve as a proxy for what would be best for any offspring that were to arrive. There's one more thing I wanted to comment on the male side, which is the exciting personality. And one theory for why males tend to look for an exciting personality is that given their ability to potentially mate with all sorts of different kinds of people, but they're choosing to settle down with one, having one person with an exciting personality sort of fits that need for having variety. That males may be sort of designed to be attracted to variety. And so having a partner who can sort of be different, right? Be exciting. I don't know what you're going to do on any given day, what you might be up for or not, what hobby you might take on, or, those kinds of things, how you might react when I tell you something. I don't even really know. This is very exciting. You're very unpredictable. That may be exciting because it kind of serves as a proxy for having different mates. So if you look at it through the evolutionary perspective, you get sort of a different explanation. One of the things that evolutionary psychologists do is they try to look for consistencies across cultures. If you see consistencies, that kind of implies that that characteristic is more innate and maybe is more universally an evolutionary benefit. If it's something that you only see in some cultures and you don't see in other cultures, you would be able to argue, well, it might be environmental, that there are pressures that cause people to behave like that. This picture that you're looking at is showing us dots where the researchers went and collected data in all sorts of different places all around the world. David Buss and his research assistants went all around the world and administered that scale that I showed you. One of the things that males all around the world prefer in a potential mate is the appearance of youth. So in youth, you would see things like clearer skin, lustrous hair. You would expect to see, fewer wrinkles, maybe, sort of the face is a little bit just sort of like higher when you're younger because it hasn't started really to sag yet. On the body, the youthful appearance would include a waist that narrows relative to the hips. That's the one physical feature that all around the world males found attractive, which is a waist that is narrower than the hips. And in fact, they found a particular ratio that seems to be the key. It's about your waist being about 7/10 the size of your hips is viewed as attractive all around the world. And so these are characteristics that they saw in all the males that they tested, basically. These kinds of desires help to ensure that the males will pass their genes into the future. If they pick these mates, it's more likely that these mates are going to be able to produce offspring. Females all around the world prefer mature, dominant, affluent, and bold males. So when looking at potential partners, females are really attracted. Now, see, a lot of people call this two bad boys. Bad boys, I don't know if that's the right word, because bad boys kind of implies that they're rule breakers and other kinds of things. But what females are really looking for is males who act in mature ways. They're dominant. That's not necessarily dominating the female, but dominant. Like other people respect them. Other people allow the male to sort of decide things, stuff like that. It doesn't have to be that they're dominating the female. Like maybe the other males respect that male. Being affluent implies that you've got some maturity under your belt, that you've climbed the ladder a little bit, that you've got some dominance. And then being bold, being able to cross the room and say hi. That's an important characteristic from a female perspective, being able to assert yourself. These characteristics really help to give the impression that this person probably can care for and will care for the offspring. And so those are the differences that males and females might display with regard to mating preferences. All right, let's go ahead and stop here. And in the next video, we will talk a little bit about, intimacy and, those factors.